The message coming out of Indianapolis is louder than people expected. And if you've been assuming the Pittsburgh Steelers would automatically pivot away from the defensive line early in this draft, you might want to slow down. After talking to multiple prospects and hearing how the interviews unfolded at the NFL Combine, it's clear the Steelers are taking a very serious look at this defensive tackle class, and not just casually. We're talking formal meetings with Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods, Ohio State's Caden McDonald, Texas Tech's Lee Hunter, and Florida State's Darrell Jackson, plus informal contact with several others. That is not accidental. That is deliberate. And when you step back and look at the roster, it starts to make sense. Yes, they drafted Derek Harmon and Y.A. Black last year. Yes, there are young pieces in place, but Cam Hayward is not getting younger, and behind the projected core, the depth has been thin. When Harmon went down last season, the run defense collapsing into a bottom-tier unit raised real questions that cannot happen again. Not if this team wants to contend. There's also the Keanu Benton discussion. Benton has flashed. He's shown real interior pass rush ability when aligned as a 3 technique, but as a full-time nose tackle. That experiment hasn't consistently worked. There were moments, but not the kind of steady anchor presence you need when teams are committed to running against light boxes. And with defenses across the league leaning into 2 high safety shells, offenses are countering by pounding the football. That brings value back to space eaters, to true nose tackles who can command double teams and keep linebackers clean. Daniel Jeremiah talked about this exact shift, how the league has come full circle. There was a stretch where if you couldn't rush the passer from the interior, you weren't seen as first-round worthy. Now, with the run game resurging as a counter to coverage trends, dominant run defenders are regaining value. That context matters when evaluating someone like Caden McDonald, or even a pure run-stuffer type later on day 2. Then there's Lee Hunter, who openly said meeting with the Steelers was amazing and that he enjoyed the conversation. He spoke about developing as a pass rusher in college, about trusting the process, about continuing to work even when you think you're close. That mentality aligns with what this organization traditionally values. The Steelers don't just scout traits, they scout makeup. But here's where it gets interesting for you as a fan. The defensive tackle class is deep. There are legitimate options projected in the middle to late first round, and there are quality starters who could be there on day 2. So the real question becomes, is it smarter to double down in the trenches again in round 1, or pivot to a glaring perimeter need? Because let's not ignore the other side of this conversation. The wide receiver room has been described internally as starving. The offense has invested heavily in the line in recent drafts. The defensive line has received premium attention. Edge rusher has been fortified, but outside the numbers, that's where the imbalance shows up. Daniel Jeremiah emphasized that the receivers who are thriving in today's NFL are strong, sturdy, mentally sharp players who can win through contact, not just pure separators, but combat catch winners who stay grounded through the catch and produce in tight windows, especially in playoff football. This receiver class offers multiple flavors, as Jeremiah put it, big-bodied options like Denzel Boston who can win through contact, players with strong hands and physical profiles who don't just rely on speed, and for the Steelers specifically, versatility is key. They need someone who can line up at X, Z, or in the slot, someone who can function within heavy 11 personnel usage and expand the route tree flexibility in the offense. Now add another layer. At inside linebacker, there's a quieter but very real need. Patrick Queen is entering the final year of his deal. Peyton Wilson's rookie season didn't fully match expectations in terms of snap share. Malik Harrison saw time. That room still lacks a long-term, 3-down green dot leader, and this is a strong linebacker class. Maybe not a must-pick at 21 overall, but absolutely a day 2 conversation. So here we are. Defensive tackle emphasis at the Combine. Clear wide receiver need, underrated inside linebacker depth requirement, and a draft class where, according to multiple evaluators, there may not be 21 true first-round graded players. That creates a strange value pocket for the Steelers. They might not have a blue-chip prospect fall into their lap like previous years. They may have to choose between multiple similarly graded players at different positions. And that's where this gets fascinating. If a top defensive tackle they love is sitting there at 21, do you keep building the front and trust the receiver depth later, or do you finally swing at a perimeter playmaker in round 1 and look for a nose tackle on day 2? Are the Steelers setting the stage for another trenches first decision, or is this just due diligence before pivoting to offense? What would you do if you're on the clock at 21 and both a high upside defensive tackle and a starting caliber wide receiver are staring you in the face? And that's the tension building inside this draft process right now. Because if you really study how the Steelers are operating in Indianapolis, it doesn't feel like they're locked into one path. It feels like they're gathering ammunition. They're preparing for multiple scenarios. And that tells me one thing. They understand how delicate this first-round decision is going to be. Let's go back to the defensive tackle conversation for a moment, because it's not just about replacing depth, it's about identity. When the Steelers have been at their best historically, they've controlled the line of scrimmage, not just with edge rushers, not just with splash plays, but with interior dominance that makes opposing offenses uncomfortable from the first quarter to the fourth. When Derek Harmon was healthy, there were flashes of that. When he went down, the ripple effect was obvious. Double teams started moving bodies, linebackers weren't as clean, the run fits got muddier. That cannot be ignored. And if you're evaluating this class the way they are, you're not just asking, is he good? You're asking, does he tilt the math? Can he command two blockers? Can he hold his ground when teams try to bully you with duo and inside zone? Because with more teams embracing physical run games to counter too high structures, that battle inside is becoming critical again. But here's the counterpunch. The offense still needs firepower. Daniel Jeremiah's comments about strong-handed receivers weren't random. They reflect playoff football. When separation shrinks, when defensive backs are tighter, when the windows are tighter, you need receivers who can win in contact. The Steelers don't just need speed, they need someone who can handle press coverage, adjust to physical corners, and stay sturdy through the catch point. That's a very specific archetype. And the reality is, the receiver room needs someone who can move around. A true multi-alignment weapon. Someone who can be part of the progression, not just a complementary piece. That type of player changes how defenses align. It changes how safeties shade. It changes how often you see stacked boxers. So while defensive tackle might strengthen your foundation, a dynamic wide receiver might raise your ceiling, then there's inside linebacker, which continues to sit quietly in the background. The Steelers have met with several off-ball linebackers, and that tells you they're thinking long-term. They need a field general, someone who can handle communication responsibilities in a defense that is expected to play more sub-package looks under the current structure. A green dot player who doesn't have to come off the field, and in a class that has depth on day 2, that might be where the value lies. But here's the strategic layer that makes this draft fascinating. According to evaluations across the league, this class may not be stacked with elite blue-chip prospects. That means teams picking in the 20s, like Pittsburgh, could find themselves in a tier cluster. Several players graded similarly. Several positions offering comparable value. When that happens, philosophy takes over. Do you stick to best player available even if that means yet another trench player? Or do you lean into roster construction and balance out the weaknesses? The Steelers have invested heavily in the offensive line recently. They've invested in the defensive line. They've strengthened the edge room. That trench core is young and promising. But football isn't just played between the hashes. It's won outside the numbers. 2, especially in January, and let's not forget something important. They hold multiple day 2 picks. That flexibility could allow them to address 2 of these needs in quick succession. If they take a receiver in the first, there are legitimate nose tackle options later. If they take a defensive tackle at 21, the receiver depth in this class might still give them a starter in round 2. This isn't a draft where the Steelers appear boxed in. It's a draft where they appear prepared. But preparation doesn't eliminate pressure, because whoever they take at 21 is going to set the tone for this offseason. It's going to signal where they believe the biggest gap truly is. Is it stopping the run and restoring interior dominance? Is it unlocking more explosiveness and versatility on offense? Or is it quietly securing the next defensive quarterback at inside linebacker? The combine meetings tell us one thing clearly. Defensive tackle is very much in play. Wide receiver is very much in play. Linebacker is being evaluated seriously. There's no smokescreen here. They are doing real work on all 3 fronts. And that brings it back to you. If you're sitting in that draft room, knowing what this roster currently looks like, knowing Cam Hayward isn't getting younger, knowing the receiver room needs juice, knowing the linebacker room needs a future leader, which direction are you pulling the trigger? It also feels like this is one of those drafts where the Steelers can't afford to convince themselves they're fine at a position just because they invested there recently. That's the trap. Just because Derek Harmon and Y.A. Black were added doesn't mean the defensive tackle room is complete. Just because there are receivers on the roster doesn't mean the offense is dynamic enough. Just because there are names at inside linebacker doesn't mean there's a long-term answer calling the defense. And that's why the activity in Indianapolis matters so much. The Steelers didn't just casually shake hands with a few defensive tackles. They scheduled formal interviews with multiple high-level prospects. That kind of access isn't random. Formal meetings are valuable real estate at the combine. You don't use them unless you are seriously evaluating that player as a potential investment. So when you see names like Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, Lee Hunter, and Darrell Jackson tied to formal contact, that signals legitimate interest. But here's what stands out even more. They weren't all the same type of player. Some bring more pass rush juice, some are more traditional run anchors. That tells you the Steelers aren't locked into one prototype, they're exploring roles. They're mapping possibilities, they're asking themselves how the defensive front should evolve, not just who fills a hole. At the same time, Daniel Jeremiah's comments about receiver traits should not be brushed aside. Strong hands, play strength, physicality through the catch, mental sharpness, that profile fits postseason football, and if you watched how tight windows became late in the year, you understand why that matters. This isn't about chasing a 4.30 40, it's about finding someone who can win when it's 3rd and 7 and the defense knows where the ball is going. Someone who doesn't fade when corners get physical, someone who can align anywhere in the formation and stress coverage rules, and that circles back to team identity. Are the Steelers trying to overwhelm opponents with trench dominance and suffocate the run? Or are they trying to evolve into a more balanced, flexible offense that can dictate matchups? There's also the contract timeline layer. Cam Hayward is still productive, but time is undefeated. Keanu Benton is approaching a decision point soon. Patrick Queen is in the final year of his deal. These timelines matter. Drafting isn't just about 2026, it's about 2027 and 2028 as well. If you take a defensive tackle in round 1, you're protecting yourself against decline and contract uncertainty up front. If you take a receiver, you're addressing an immediate need that has been obvious for more than a season. If you take a linebacker early, you're securing the communication core of the defense for years. The Steelers also hold significant draft capital overall. That opens the door to a potential trade-down scenario if the board falls flat in their tier. In a class where there may not be a clean separation between picks 15 and 35, sliding back a few spots while adding capital could be a real possibility. That strategy would align perfectly with the idea of targeting deep positions like defensive tackle or linebacker on day 2. But let's not overlook something subtle. Energy. When Lee Hunter talked about meeting with the Steelers, he lit up. That matters. Culture fit matters. This organization has always placed a premium on football character, coachability, and hunger. It's not just about tape grades, it's about whether a player fits the locker room. And from everything coming out of Indianapolis, the Steelers are casting a wide net while staying disciplined. So now the pressure builds toward draft night. If a defensive tackle they love is available, do they stay true to their long-standing trench philosophy? If a versatile, strong-handed wide receiver is sitting there, do they finally prioritize perimeter explosiveness? If the value isn't clean at 21, do they trust their board enough to move back? These are not small decisions. This pick shapes the tone of the offseason and potentially the direction of the roster for the next 5 years. So I'll leave you with this before we shift into breaking down specific prospect fits in the next segment. If you believe championships are won by controlling the line of scrimmage, you probably lean defensive tackle. If you believe modern playoff football demands versatile weapons who win in tight coverage, you probably lean wide receiver. Because at the end of the day, this decision is going to tell us how the Steelers view themselves right now. Not who they were 2 years ago, not what their identity used to be, but who they believe they must become to compete in this current AFC landscape. Think about the competition. Teams are spreading you out, forcing you into nickel, daring you to stop the run with lighter boxes. If you can't